If there's any question about whether the FBI is taking this as a possible terrorist attack, we may have an answer in the fact that they have sealed the Lincoln and Holland tunnels now as a precaution. Those tunnels are sealed at both ends, so they are not allowing traffic to pass through the Lincoln and Holland tunnels. PATH train service is suspended.
The cops are stopping us. Everywhere we go, it's like, no, you can't go through, you can't go through. This is an isolated thing. We can't let anyone through. No one can get by. Frozen zone. I saw what was like a piece of machinery. It was like on Church Street, over by Park Place. And I shoot it, not knowing what it was. And then someone said, oh my God, it's a piece of the plane. So I'm shooting it, shooting people looking at it, people's reaction. And the whole thing, the whole time, I still don't realize what I'm witnessing, what's going on. I still have no clue what the hell is happening.
We now have word from law enforcement sources that both of these airplanes striking the World Trade Center were flights that came out of Boston, and if I'm getting this information correctly, that both airplanes were hijacked out of Boston, flown to New York, and struck the side of the World Trade Center. The city now on high terrorist alert. There were plenty of cameras at that school in Florida for what was to be a routine event with the president making a speech in front of some school children. And there's one moment that you always think of as you look back at that, where the president learned about the second plane crash. Andrew Card came up to him and just briefly whispered at him and told him what had happened. And you'll never forget the look on Bush's face at that time.
Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
By this time in the morning, we knew that there were hundreds or thousands of people who were on those top floors of the towers who just didn't have a way out. And we started to get pictures where you could see that there were people behind those windows. There were people who had broken windows to try to get a breath of fresh air. There were people waving to try to let people know where they were. And as we learned through the day, there were many people who felt that their only way out was to jump from the buildings.
I kept thinking, how bad is it up there that people are choosing to jump as the better option?
I can hear myself saying, oh, Shaz, I got the jumpers, and thinking, like, not knowing at that time that, like, there wasn't, like, a trampoline, and they weren't, like, okay at the bottom.
You have to ask the question now about structural damage to the World Trade Center towers, and whether we'll see those towers occupied anytime in the years to come.
We had known within, I would say, just a few minutes of the second plane hitting that there were other possible hijacked planes in the air, and that was really scary.
Associated Press now reporting an aircraft has crashed into the Pentagon. So now this is the third apparently deliberate air crash. The first two into the towers of the World Trade Center, the third crashing into the Pentagon, and the White House is being evacuated now.
There's a slow process of realizing that the magnitude of this disaster is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the circles are wider and wider and wider of people who are affected by this.
We had all these developments in New York, and that was more than enough to keep track of. But suddenly we started getting these reports through the wire services and then through other sources about what was going on in Washington. And clearly the big event there was the plane crash into the Pentagon, but there was all this other information as well about evacuations in other federal buildings, evacuations at the Capitol, at the White House. They were pulling people out, and there was word that there may have been another plane destined for somewhere in Washington. So all of that was happening, and yet we still had a tremendous number of developments in New York that we were keeping track of at the same time. A commercial aviation service across the country and all aircraft takeoffs have been suspended by the Federal Aviation Administration. That an unprecedented step taken by the FAA just a moment ago in the wake of this apparent deliberate and concerted effort to crash these airplanes into these buildings in New York and Washington. So Kristen Shaughnessy had been able to get very close to the towers, and she found a payphone that was near the foot of one of the towers, called in, and so we put her on the air live, and I started into question and answer with her about what she was seeing. As she's talking, we're looking at one of the live pictures of the towers, and suddenly I saw what she saw and heard, which was that something was happening at the top of that tower and it was starting to crumble. And that was one of the most frightening moments of the whole morning for me, because I knew how close she was to the tower.
Oh, it's just coming down, Pat. It is just coming down.
Watch the right
it's
side.
Exploding.
The building is ripping apart.
It is billowing. Pat, the debris is flying. I'm going to run.
Okay. All right. We hope that Kristen was not in a position where she would have been injured by that, but the tower is literally crumbling into the streets of Manhattan there.
When I first saw it, I think I said it before you could kind of see it on the air because it was right in front of me, and it just was like a pancake. Just every floor just pancaking down on the next one. And it was surreal, and I didn't move at first because I said, I'm far enough away, I'm 2 streets away. Well, we have a 110-story building coming down, it's not far enough. So the FBI agents who were on the street, the only ones on the street at that point, FBI agents, firemen, cops, and some people who were still trying to get out. But for the most part, it was closed off. And they started running. And this FBI agent grabbed me and he said, you better run or you're going to die.
It was probably 30 seconds before I was able to leave that idea behind and really concentrate on the overall magnitude of what was happening, because her story at that moment was just typical of what was happening for thousands of people who had gathered on the streets in that area, who had evacuated from other buildings, who had evacuated from the Twin Towers. And all of them were faced with the same thing, where they were walking out of the area in sort of an orderly way, thinking that they're not going to come back to work till the next day. And then there was this rumble and the tower coming down and the smoke and the dust that just covered the whole area. And it was sort of a process of a few seconds to realize the magnitude of that.
We were able to get all the way down to the Stuyvesant High School overpass. And at that point, we were stopped by a crossing guard. In my view, luckily we were stopped, because I don't know if she would have let us go further or if she would have directed us onto a side street. We were at Chambers Street and West Street when I heard this incredible roar.
Oh my God! Shit! Get me out of the car! Get out! Get out!
I was resting my shoulder, because we had no tripods, resting my shoulder and looking up again, because you can't help but look at that burning building. And that's when we saw the explosion of debris. And that's when, I quickly switched gears. I'm not shooting anymore.
When the building collapsed, that's when the real panic set in, when the building collapsed, because I think most people thought, I know I did, thought it was a third plane. Nobody ever, you just saw this big cloud and all the debris falling. I mean, you can imagine the Trade Center falling, and I definitely thought it was a third plane. And then I figured, well, a third one could very easily be a fourth and a fifth and a sixth.
Exactly.
And that's why I took off.
So I stopped on West Street and I looked up and I was counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, counting down how many floors above the impact on the South Tower. And as I was doing so, the sound of the tower started to crumble as I just stood there and stared at it. And it was just, the sound is what stays with me.